So, Christmas. It is the most wonderful time of the year. Christmas is a cultural phenomenon. It has become even more so in the past few years. And it's one of these cultural phenomenons where the event of Christmas has become more about the cultural expressions of Christmas than what it was originally about anyway. And in fact, Christmas, the holiday, is not even associated with Jesus' birthday until like the Middle Ages, when the church said, we should have a special day when we recognize Jesus' birth. And so then it became sort of this thing. So Christmas has gone through changes. But I remember when I was a kid, I asked my dad once, as I began to learn to read, and as I began to learn to spell, I noticed something interesting about Christmas. It has a T in it. Now, it says Christmas when I say it. Christmas. Christmas. There's no T in it. So I asked my dad, Dad, what's the T all about? And he said, well, it's because Christmas is nothing without Christ. It's about Christ. It's about Jesus. And I remembered at that time thinking, I was really young. I was just learning to read. And I was like, oh, so it's not just a coincidence that Jesus was born on Christmas. It's not like Jesus was the luckiest kid or the unluckiest kid in the world to be born on Christmas and only get one day out of the year where you really get all those presents and things. So I was, I had felt sorry for him. No, here's the thing. Jesus is the core, the central truth about Christmas. And from the earliest days, I began to learn that. But all of us have seen how our culture has flowed with Christmas. Now, I want to let you know that we are a very unique church. At least I believe we are. In two respects. I've written them out on the top of your note sheet. No blanks to fill in. I just want you to know who you are and who you're sitting next to. We're a church that doesn't boycott our culture. Okay? But we do intend to speak truth to it. We're also a church that doesn't blanketly embrace culture. But we do want to engage it. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at some Christmas movies, some favorite Christmas movies, maybe some not so favorite Christmas movies. We're going to explore the hits and the misses, because I think in every one of the Christmas movies, you can find something that can draw us toward the message of Jesus and draw us toward the true meaning of Christmas. And you can also find things that distract us and draw us away from the true meaning of Christmas and draw us away from the message of Jesus. So the first movie we're going to tackle is Elf. Now, it's not my desire to just sort of blast the movie and be all critical about the movie. We actually own the movie that we played last night here, so I allowed the movie to enter our house, and money went out of our house to get the movie into our house, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not just going to stand up here and blast the movie and say, oh, you heathen pagans who watch Christmas movies. I'm not going to say that. Well, I guess I just did. But I didn't mean it. So you're okay. You're safe for another week. So anyway, I'm not going to blast this thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at it and see what are the things that point us towards Jesus, what are the things that draw us away from Jesus. And when it comes to this movie, there are three big themes that I just want you to jot down here at the beginning that I think are good themes in the movie. The first theme is childlikeness. I took the sound off because I made this a loop. It'll just go on forever. I think I'm going to make that my screensaver. Yeah, it'd just be awesome. Come into your desk and he's still going. He's still going. Still going. Okay, so childlikeness is one theme in the Elf movie. The whole movie, he's got sort of the attitude of a child, the character of a child, and that's sort of who Buddy is. I mean, even his name is kind of childlike as a name. And childlikeness is one of the great themes. Another great theme in this movie is faith. The importance of belief, the importance of putting your faith into something. That's a theme in this movie. Another theme that's in this movie is the theme of caring for others rather than caring for yourself only and being selfish. In fact, the big turnaround that happens is when the son approaches the dad and says, Dad, you only care about yourself. Buddy cares about everyone. And I didn't put that as a clip because I've got far too many other clips to show you, so I'm just gonna verbalize that one. But it's when the dad turns from being selfish to being a little other-focused, and that's a good theme. But what I want you to recognize is that these three themes, even though they have become synonymous with Christmas in our culture, even though almost every Christmas movie you ever watch is going to talk about these same three themes, childlike wonder, they're going to talk about the importance of belief, they're going to talk about being nice to other people. Every Christmas movie talks about these themes. But the themes would not exist if it weren't for Jesus. You see, Jesus was the first person in the history of the world to say that children were worth something. Jesus was the first person in the history of the world who said, "Let the little children come to me and don't hinder them, because the Father's kingdom belongs to such as these." He says, if you don't enter heaven like a little child, you don't get in at all. The whole childlike innocence theme starts with Jesus. Well, what about this whole faith idea? Well, before Jesus, it was all about what you did, not what you believed. It didn't matter what you believed about the idols, you still needed to sacrifice to them. And if you were a Jew, it didn't matter really what you believed about all this stuff, you just had to follow the law. You just need to do it. But when we get to Jesus, he's the first person who says, no. Trust in me, and I will make your burden easy, and I will give you rest, and I will bring you healing and forgiveness. Jesus is the first one to emphasize faith. And then what about being self-giving, self-sacrificial, caring for others first? Jesus is the first guy in human history who took the golden rule from a negative and turned it into a positive. Before Jesus, all the expressions of the golden rule were, do not do to anyone what you don't want them to do to you. Jesus is the first person to flip it to a positive when he said, do to others what you do want them to do to you. Be proactive. He says if your enemy slaps you on one cheek, give to them the other cheek also. He says if someone wants your cloak, give them your cloak and your shirt. He says if someone wants you to walk 1 mile, go 2 miles. Jesus is the first person who says, sacrifice yourself for the sake of others. And he's the first person who actually did it. All of these themes don't exist without Jesus. But we live in a society that has taken the themes as the good thing to acknowledge and has forgotten the source. I think in all these movies that we're going to look at over these next couple of weeks, none of the good themes would exist without Jesus. But if you look at only the surface of the movie and of the cultural expression of Christianity, you're going to get things that may lead you away from Jesus. You have to dig below the surface to find where it all came from, where the source is. And in this movie in particular, in the Elf movie, we're going to find that even though the title is Elf, and even though the number one actor is Will Ferrell playing a character called Buddy, even though Buddy is the number one character, there's another guy in the movie that the movie is really all about. I want to show you this clip. Here you go.
Santa. 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 Santa.
I made that clip yesterday. It took me forever to clip all those Santas together, but I laughed the whole time. It was just awesome. So the movie is really about Santa. Most of our cultural Christmas things are all about Santa. One of the things that's interesting about Santa is that new stories can keep being told about Santa. Every single year, a new story comes out with a new thing that Santa has done or didn't do, a new problem that Santa had to overcome, a new issue that Santa has to deal with, a new enemy that Santa has to face. Every year, new stories come out, and that's the way our culture is doing this. That's the way our culture is viewing Christmas. In fact, as we progress during this particular movie, you're going to see some things where this movie equates Christmas spirit with believing in Santa. But what I want to do right now is I want to take you and walk you through a historical study of St. Nicholas. I think it's important for you to understand kind of where this all came from. And as I said before, it's not my intent to burst anyone's bubble, but questions may be asked at the end of this. So I'm just letting you know. So, St. Nicholas, as far as we can tell, was born in 270 AD. Now, what I'm talking about is only about 200 years after Jesus. Okay? Jesus died somewhere around 33, came back to life somewhere around 33, went back to heaven around that same year. And now in 270, around that time, is when a man named Nicholas was born to wealthy parents. His parents were very rich, but they died when he was young. And when Nicholas was young, as a wealthy individual, he noticed that all the people around him, all the other people, were poor. And he understood there was a big problem, that he had all this money, him, this little kid, and all these families around him were poor. As soon as he had the ability to make his own decisions, he set aside his money for the cause of the poor in his community. And as soon as he was old enough to execute on that plan, he was generous and giving money away. Now, the Catholics are the ones who have named him a saint. And so it's to their benefit that they keep accurate records of all these things. But according to the Catholic website, that's as far as the factual details go. There are a whole bunch of other stories associated with St. Nicholas. In fact, stories about miracles that he's done, stories about other things that he's done. But all those stories are somewhat doubted. All we know about the factual Nicholas was that he was, at some point, a generous man, and then later on, because of his generosity, was named bishop of a town called Myra. But that's about as far as the details go. Now, there are some stories that are associated with him. The most famous of those stories is that there was a man in his town who was poor. Of course, everybody was poor. There was a man in his town who was poor, who had lost his job, who had no source of income whatsoever. He didn't have a wife anymore. She had passed away, and he had 3 daughters. But he didn't have enough money to get them married. Back in that culture, we're talking 300 years after Jesus. Back in that culture, they had to pay. The father of the bride had to pay the groom to get his daughters married. And he had no money. And so the daughters could not be married. But he had no money to take care of them either. So his only course of action was to sell them to prostitution, which, as the story goes, he was about to do. When the night before this deal was going to be made, Nicholas snuck underneath one of their windows and threw a bag of gold over the window so that one of the daughters could be married off. We don't know how long it took, but he eventually threw 3 bags of gold over the window, and eventually all 3 of the daughters got married off. And